Hello, today we're going to be talking about population dynamics. Just if you remember, a population is a group of individuals of a single species that occupies the same general area at the same time. Now, to understand the structure and dynamics of each population that make up communities, ecologists examine population density. So this is just showing you population. Population density is the number of individuals of a species per unit area or volume um, at the same time. And just to give you some examples, the population density of people in Manhattan in New York City is about 100,000 per square mile. The population density of a sugar maple tree in, let's say, Michigan is about 300 per 741 acres. The population density of a dinoflagellate in a red tide is about 8 million per liter of ocean water. So population density needs to be determined, and you do that by counting every individual in an area, or we could sample or estimate it. So sampling is when ecologists estimate population density by counting a number of individuals in a small representational area and then extrapolate that figure to the total area being studied. And this is just showing you some graphs of population density. Now, the way that individuals are spaced within the area is called the dispersion pattern. And we do have three types. We have clumped, uniform, and random. And we will define each of those after the pictures. So clumped is typically the most common. This is when individuals are in patches, and that will result from unequal distribution of resources, or it could be mating or social behavior that causes it. Typically, individuals will clump or aggregate into groups, forming droves, schools, flocks, and herds. Sometimes animals get clumped because they cooperate in their society and gain protection from predators by remaining in the herds. Plants need to kind of clump together because favorable conditions for germination and survival really only occur in suitable patches of land. Their plant seeds are dispersed in groups, all right, and then sometimes the asexual reproduction, like their stolons, rhizomes, bulbs, branches, they kind of concentrate their offspring near the parent plant, okay? So again, this is the most common. Uniform is an even pattern of dispersion, and it results from interactions between the individuals of a population. Sometimes it is when members of a species repel one another. Let's say roots of some plants release chemicals that inhibit the growth of other members of its species, or animals will establish and defend their territories. Both chemical inhibition and territoriality, maintain an even maximum distance between members of the species, and that does create a uniform pattern of individuals. Random is the least common pattern in natural populations. This is when individuals in a population are spaced in a patternless, unpredictable way. In order for an individual to be randomly distributed, two things must be met. First, the presence of one individual can in no way affect the location of another. And second, environmental conditions must be more or less the same throughout an area. And both of these are very rare to have occurred. Okay, as far as the distribution patterns go, none of them really remain permanent over time. All right, sometimes there are seasonal changes that will trigger migrations, causing some distribution of the clumping or the uniform or random patterns. Perhaps maybe falling temperatures or something different can affect that. And again, this is just an overview of the three types of dispersion patterns. Life tables are very useful for people to see how long people are going to live. So a life table is a table used to determine how long, on average, an individual of a given age could be expected to live. Okay, and it's just a prediction on life expectancy. Survivorship curves is a curve that plots the proportion of individuals alive at each age. And it pretty much is going to allow for comparison of species with varying lifespans. So type 1, mortality remains low for much of the organism's life and then increases sharply as the individuals reach an old age. This is very typical of humans. Okay. Type 2 is kind of a straight diagonal line that indicates the chance of survival remains about the same throughout an individual's lifetime. This is for many birds and small aquatic animals. Type 3 is exactly the opposite of type 1. Most individuals die when they are very young, and only a few adults survive to old age. Species tend to produce large amounts of offspring and don't provide much parental care, if any. And this would be insects, frogs, many plants. Okay, so just in words, type 1 produce few offspring but give good care. Type 2 is intermediate with death. And type 3, there's a lot of death in young, and that's why there's a lot of offspring. And then there's a period where death rates are much lower. There are two terms to talk about when we talk about population growth. We have what is called limiting factors, which is environmental factors that will restrict population growth, typically food, nutrients, resources. Carrying capacity is the maximum population size that a particular environment can support, and we call this K. Okay, so the size of a population that can be supported indefinitely is called the carrying capacity of the environment. Okay. There are two different growth models. We have an exponential growth model, which is the J curve, and the logistic growth model. So exponential growth, okay? So this is J, because you can see how we have an increase of age and population. So when populations grow at a very high rate of increase, the number of individuals increase exponentially. So like we have 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, and so on. This is typically demonstrated by bacteria. Okay, bacterium can divide every 20 minutes, so it will continuous and continuous and continuous. So about 7 hours of growth for bacteria, there could be 2 million bacteria. All right. However, we do have limiting factors that can cause die-offs. If they run out of resource or habitat, they can die. All right. So this is pretty much exponential growth. The next one is the logistic, or the S curve. Okay, this type of growth, environmental resistance increases as the population approaches the carrying capacity of the environment, which will then allow a slowed growth. Okay, so members of the population increase slowly at first. Then, as the reproductive base builds, the population goes into a period of growth, but then it will slow down as the population approaches the carrying capacity, and that's what forms the S curve. All right, boom and bust cycles is fluctuations in the density of populations. Okay, so again, it's just a fluctuation of the population size. Life history is a series of events from birth through reproduction to death. And we have two types of individuals. We have R selection, and we do have K selection. R selection is when individuals mature early and produce a large number of offspring at a time. Okay. K selection, individuals produce few well cared for offspring. Okay. Typically, K-selected species uses strategies that are more favorable for populations nearing the carrying capacity of the environment. Okay, think of rabbits. They produce a lot of offspring at one time, so they have the ability to reproduce large numbers of offspring in an uninhabited area before the slower reproducing species can do that. So R selection has a lot of individuals. K selection is a few, but very well cared for. So if you guys have any questions, let me know tomorrow. Thanks.